Hi, this is Brooks Kubik, and I'm here today with my very good friend Bill Hinbern. And for those of you who have been living under a large rock in the furthest waste of Outer Mongolia, and therefore do not know who Bill Hinbern is, you are in for a treat. Because Bill Hinbern is one of the most knowledgeable men in the entire physical culture, strength training, strongman, iron game arena. You will not find anyone who knows the history of physical culture, the history of strongmanism, the history of strength training, the way Bill Hinbern knows it. And I'm very pleased to have him here today. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to someone that I consider to be my friend, my teacher, and my mentor. So, Bill, tell everybody, all of the ones who've been living under that rock in Outer Mongolia, bless their hearts, tell them how you got started in the training side of physical culture. And I know that you've done other things, but let's focus on the time when young Bill Hinbern said, I want what? What did you want, and how did you try to achieve it?
Thank you, Brooks, for this privilege. When I was a young man, actually a child, 2 years old, I had scarlet fever. At 8 years old, I was hit by a car. And at 10 years old, I had the #1 child killer during that era, rheumatic fever. And it nearly killed me. Now back then, the physicians, their answer was bed rest. So for 3 weeks, I was sitting on a bed, lying on a bed. I was given blood thinners, aspirin, to the point that my ears rang. I weighed 100 pounds when I went into the hospital. After 3 weeks, they released me. They tried to stand me on a scale. The muscles in my legs atrophied to the point where I could not stand. I went home, and that was to be followed by 6 months in a bed. The only time I was allowed to get up was to go and use the bathroom. This I lived with for 6 months. I was 10 years old. Imagine. It was springtime. This all occurred in January. Winter broke out. Spring came in March. I looked outside. I saw all my friends playing. They wanted to play. They would come to the house. I was not allowed to go outside. Imagine, 10 years old, to have to sit in bed. After that, I went back to school in the fall with the doctor's permission, and I wanted to play football once again. I had played football since I was 8 years old, Pop Warner, and the doctor said, no football. And I looked at the doctor and I said, why? I feel fine. The doctor said, we're not concerned about how you feel at this moment. We had determined that you had heart damage from the virus of rheumatic fever. We are concerned about when you're 40, 45 years old. Well, a 10-year-old boy does not envision 45 years old. That's way too far off. So, I did not play football that year. I ran with the kids out on the playground. I was in grade school, and I loved to run. I loved to be outdoors because I had been cooped up in a house for 6 months. I loved to go outside. Any day that was sunny, I went outside. In the following fall, I begged my father to play football. We didn't.
So that's when you're 12 years old?
Yeah, about 11.
Okay. So the rheumatic fever hits when you're 10.
Mm-hmm.
You basically lose a year of your life.
Yes.
And now you're 11 and a half, still looking at playing football.
Yes.
Doctor's still fighting that.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and what happened next?
The next thing happened is I begged my father to play football. We went to the doctor, and the doctor hesitated, hemmed and hawed, and still was against it. I was heartbroken, absolutely devastated. I loved to play the game. I loved to be with my friends. I went home. I still continued to pester my father, and he let me play. I played football. I felt fine. I had no problems. And I ran track in the spring, and that was definitely a no-no on the part of the doctor. That was the way they handled rheumatic fever back then. They don't do the same thing that they did back then. It's just not how they handled it. But regardless, at 12 years old, I decided, after looking at magazine articles when I was bedridden, I had clipped out a magazine article of a man by the name of Charles Atlas, most perfectly developed man in the world.
And some of our listeners, even if they've been living under that rock in outer Mongolia, may be familiar with Charles Atlas. So you actually, that was your first introduction to physical culture, was the Charles Atlas advertisements.
Pretty much. There were other advertisements, of course, Joe Weider. I was looking at Outdoor Life, Boys Life, Popular Mechanics. Occasionally I would see an ad for Joe Weider, Harry Good, the Good Brothers, Dan Lurie, Seal Test Dan, the Muscle Man, circus and what have you. But I mowed lawns all summer, and I purchased this course on the installment plan.
You're talking about the Atlas course.
The Atlas course. Yeah. And I sent my $2 or $3 in every week or so. I think it was every other week. And I would get another lesson, you know. And I started out with the body weight exercises, eating according as to what he said as much as possible. And I firmed up. It conditioned me. It spurned my interest. And from there, one day, after playing football, because during those days, by the way, coaches did not want their team to lift weights. So what I did is I honored his wishes like everybody else. We didn't lift weights, but we played the game. And in my, I want to say senior in high school, I happened to be in downtown Detroit at J.L. Hudson's, there's a big store down there, and walked through their magazine department, and I saw a copy of Muscle Builder. And I was fascinated by the cover man. So I picked up the magazine, looked through it, and I put down my whopping 50 cents for it, and took it home. And
Do you remember who was on the cover?
yes, I want to say I believe it was Dave Draper, a young Dave Draper.
Okay. And Muscle Builder was one of the Weider magazines.
Yes.
Okay.
Joe Weider at that time put out a magazine by the name of Muscle Builder and another one by the name of Mr. America.
Okay.
And I took that Muscle Builder magazine home, and I read it and read it and read it. All the promises, all the grandeur. This was what I wanted to do. But I had no weights. So I managed to, we had a 3-car garage that was converted from a barn, and what I did is I converted coffee cans and some old water pipe and cement into a barbell. And later on, 2 more I made into, or 4 more I made into 2 dumbbells with cement. And I thought this was it. I had a set of weights. Fixed weights, but nevertheless, weights. And I started to work out with the various exercises I saw in the magazine. And then some months later, I saw a copy of Strength and Health magazine, which, believe it or not, I liked a lot more, because a lot of the articles in there were pretty much toned down but to me they made more sense. And so I used that to advantage. But the pinnacle, the real day that my life changed as far as physical culture and weightlifting is when I saw in Strength and Health magazine an ad for high protein. So I went to a health food store, because that's the only place that would have that type of thing during the 60s, and I saw a box of Hoffman's High Protein. It was a blue box with orange print, and it had a picture of John Grimmick on the cover. I had to have that protein. So I put down, I think it was around $3 for this protein, picked it up, I started walking out the door. And as I started walking out the door, I saw a magazine rack, one of those spin-around magazine racks, and I saw a copy of Iron Man magazine. And just as I walked by, I thought it was an advertisement, as much of the other pamphlets from, say, for example, Paul Bragg, Prevention magazine, etc. And I looked at it and I picked it up and I thumbed through it and I realized it was a magazine. And I was spellbound with this magazine. I looked at the articles. I looked at the training. I looked at the Olympic lifting. I looked at the contest coverage. I looked at the ads in the back. I looked at the advertising in the front and the back for equipment. Because at that time, Perry Rader, the owner of Iron Man magazine, manufactured his own body culture equipment. So I went back to the counter, once again plopped down a whopping 50 cents for this magazine, quickly walked out to my car, sat there in the car, and read through half that magazine and perused the rest of it. And that changed everything. I immediately went home. They had some classified ads in the back of the magazine. I immediately got an envelope and some stamps and started answering these ads for various publications. They had one fellow from New Jersey, my old friend Angelo Ayuspa. He was a buy-sell trade, old-time strongman, books, courses, and magazine. Another gentleman was Dr. Frank J. Thompson of Manhattan, Kansas. And he also ran the same type of ad in publications. I answered other ads for equipment. I wanted catalogs. Ed Jubenville from Holyoke, Massachusetts. Equipment and manufacturer, and also one of the last muscle control artists. And he was also into arm wrestling. I began, after about a week, to receive all sorts of catalogs, brochures, etc., for all sorts of magazines, back issues. I had no idea that these magazines that I held in my hands had been published for so long. Muscle Builder, in various forms. Joe Weider started his magazines in 1941. Mr. America, formerly Your Physique, was started in, I believe, 1940. Strength and Health, 1932. Iron Man, 1936. And I thought, wow, if I have this information, and this information is this good, what do all these other magazines have? So I started ordering back issues of magazines. Perry Rader also offered certain copies that he had of Iron Man magazine. So it began flowing in. I also ordered various publications from old-time strongmen such as Earl Lederman, George Jowett, etc. And Perry Rader also had his publications.
Now, for those who are living in the modern world and get on eBay and look at advertisements for the old magazines that you've mentioned and some of the old books and courses and the original and so on, they are selling nowadays for $20, $30, $40, $50 for a magazine, sometimes $200, $300 for some of the magazines. Books, $200, $300, $400, $500. What were you paying for these wonderful old books and magazines and courses and things back then?
Well, you have to keep in mind the proper perspective of the economy back then, okay? If you were working, if you were a skilled worker, you would make possibly $5 an hour. That would translate to, what, $10,000 a year, okay? An automobile, my first automobile that I bought cost $3,000, okay? So, like I said earlier, the magazines that I bought brand new, 50 cents. So, the magazines that I was buying, I have to remember this is the secondary market. You're not buying them brand new, you're buying from the secondary market, and these individuals can ask whatever they want for them. And a lot of it had to do with the popularity, the rarity. Some magazines with a certain individual on the cover, such as John Grimmick, would be big sellers, and those would command a higher price. It would be common for me to pay $1 or $2 for a magazine retail. Now, if there were many deals where people would say, okay, if you buy 12 magazines, it would be free postage, okay, or you would get 12 for the cost of 10. And then if you went into 50 and 100, which I did many times because I wanted every single back issue I could lay my hands on of Strength and Health, Muscular Development, which at that time had only been published a couple years and edited by John Grimmick. I wanted every issue, okay? And I wanted every issue, especially of Iron Man. That was the magazine as far as, and still is, when it was published by Perry Rader up until 1986. He published it for 50 years and retired. These are the magazines that I wanted. And I also wanted publications by old-time strongmen because that's who they talked about in these magazines. Who's Arthur Saxon? Who's Eugen Sandow? And I began to show an interest. It blossomed, and I read everything. I read quite a bit, and I'd have to say most everything in the real blue blood Iron Game world in the English language.